Hi everyone, welcome back to Digital Marketing Musings again. I think last year we talked about the solution called MiFo, which was middle funnel optimization, and it was particularly aimed at extracting like a lot of value within the middle of the funnel, right? And I think over the past few months we've been trying and testing this solution, and we've gotten pretty good results. And we have again with us Karan Sinha today, who's the AVP of Client Solutions at Merkle India, and who's going to be sharing the impact of the solution that we have been seeing the results so far. So, hi Karan, welcome back to DMMs, and it's so great to have you again on the call. And why don't you start with a short recap of MiFo, right? And we can take it ahead.
Yeah, hi Vishali, good to be here
Yeah,
again. Yeah, so I think it's been a few months since we've done the last bit on MiFo. So
yeah,
I'll just quickly recap about what we spoke last time, right? We spoke about how MiFo helps advertisers utilize their data, the user activity data that's getting generated in the middle of the funnel to sort of create predictive signals that can be used by advertising platforms like Google and Facebook to enhance, acquisition of the right user for them, right? And essentially, what that does is it helps them bring down their costs of acquisition of such users and build a more robust learning on the campaigns, both for acquisition as well as engagement henceforth, right? So I'll be using the term right user quite a bit, and it's just a generic term that I use for a user that is the most relevant for the business. And when we go ahead and discuss some specific use cases, I will add more detail to it. So the idea of doing this session was to just follow up and brush up on what we've done on MiFo. And in the last few months, we've made some developments and run some more tests, right? So I wanted to talk about a bit more detail about the kind of questions that we are getting from some of the pitches that we make and help people understand how they can sort of use it better.
so like you mentioned, right? Like apart from acquisition, this also helps with a lot of engagement. Can you like elaborate that on a little bit? Because I wouldn't understand how like a solution which is completely aimed at the middle of the funnel, like serve both the acquisition and the retention. So if you can just shed some light on that part.
Sure. So I think that's a very good angle to look at and sort of answer at this stage. So MiFo essentially is based on the concept of predicting any action in the future, right?
Mhm.
And then we communicate this action to advertising platforms and use it for various goals, right? Three primarily. First one being acquisition, the second one is retention and engagement of the user, and the third one is also suppression of various audiences at different stages, right? So
Okay.
I'll talk about acquisition first.
Mhm.
Let's say I predicted who my right user is, right? For acquisition, what MiFo can help advertisers do is tell their acquisition campaigns that this is the right user for me and I want to acquire more such people, right? So it does two things for them. One is increases the concentration of the number of right users coming in their acquisition campaigns, and the second one is obviously reducing the cost of acquisition for such users as well. Right. So that sort of sums up the acquisition bit, and we've seen some very good results specifically with UAC campaigns on the acquisition side for some of our clients. Moving on to retention and engagement. Again, what MiFo does here is provides a lot of predicted subsets of audiences, right? Who are likely to perform a certain valuable action in the future. So it could be somebody like a group of users who are likely to make a purchase in the future, or group of users who are likely to make a high value purchase, stay retained for longer, right? So various kinds of subsets, which then advertisers can use to create targeted campaigns for them with specific communication to either get them to do the action faster or maybe increase the number of people who are actually executing that action, right? So
Right.
that answers your question about retention.
Mhm.
uh, The third use case that we can also sort of achieve with MiFo is suppression, right? So um, it can also identify audiences that are likely to complete a goal organically, right? So let's say I acquire 100 people today, and I find out that 50 of them were organically willing to convert themselves without any advertising push. Why should I waste my campaign money showing ads to such people, right? So what we can do is suppress such audiences that are organically predisposed to completing uh, valuable actions. Or the second kind could be, let's say, people who will install the app and uninstall it, likely to uninstall it in the near future, right? Again, in that case, depending on the advertiser's goals, they may want to choose to suppress such audiences from certain campaigns that are aimed at longer term engagement, right?
Got it.
So, suppression is another way MIFO can be used, right? So, that sort of covers the broad use
Yeah.
cases.
That's actually pretty interesting. And the first part where you mentioned that, we could like not reach out to people who are already taking efforts to organically make the searches and then convert themselves. So that's like money not spent well. But how do you figure out those kind of audiences? Is it from the Google campaigns that we're running and we have past data that people are organically making searches so far? Is that how we're doing it?
Yeah, that's exactly how we do it. So what we do is basically look at behaviors of people who had installed our app, right, in
Mhm.
the and made organic purchases without any advertising intervention, right? And see what is the early behavior that they exhibited on the app and how that differentiates it from people who actually required some advertising to make that action, right? And then identify this subset and use it uh, to negate or maybe to push more communication. Again, depends on how the brand wants to see it.
Got it. Pretty interesting takeaways, really. At least on the suppression part, I'm actually pretty surprised. So coming to the next and most important aspect, right? Like, what are the kind of people that have been benefiting from this solution, right? Do you see any, like niches across the industry that this solution might be fit, more relatable to some people? What do you want to comment on that?
Hmm. So before getting into the industries, I would also want to mention where exactly people have been seeing value in the campaigns that we've run so far, right? So the two most important metrics that get impacted with when we start a MiFo campaign, the first one is concentration of the right user that I spoke about before. So you can see this in any metric like orders per install or transactions per install, subscriptions per install, depending on the nature of the business, and that's for app install campaigns. So basically any metric relating to the concentration of a valuable user. The second one that gets impacted is the cost of acquisition of such users, right? So we've seen some very good results in reducing this number as well. So for e-commerce, we've run 2, 3 experiments where we've seen this cost of acquisition of users who are making an order has come down to about 40% of what it used to be before we ran MiFo, right? So that's quite a significant improvement. Now we are trying to make understand how much scale we can achieve at that number so that we can bring out the most volume of profit for that brand,
Got
right?
it. Yeah. Do you want to discuss some particular use cases here? Do you want to highlight?
Sure. So I'll talk about use cases by industry, right? And going one industry at a time. So mostly the core of the use cases comes from the three acquisition, retention, and suppression areas that we discussed before.
Mhm.
But the flavor changes with each industry, right? So I'd like to touch upon what all sort of experimentations and outcomes can people expect for different industries. So Starting with e-commerce, where we have done a lot of experimentation ourselves. uh, Things that work very well for us are predicting buyers, and then using that signal to tell your acquisition campaigns that these are the users that are more likely to purchase, get more such people, right? So that ends up reducing the costs of acquisition that we had spoken about earlier. And we have like two case studies on this. One coming out very soon again with one of our active customers, where we are again seeing very good value coming on predicting buyers. The second place where e-commerce can benefit is predicting high value buyers, right? So for people who have stores where the price range of products varies from like a 500 to 1,000 bucks ticket to a 50,000 and above ticket, would want to spend different kind of money on both these users, right? Somebody who's buying a 500 rupees product versus a higher value purchase. So, and therefore the brand will be able to afford a higher cost of acquisition also for somebody who's making a higher value purchase. So predicting the kind of audiences that are likely to make a high value purchase can sort of have you bifurcate your acquisition campaigns, so that you have two campaigns running, where in one you have a higher tolerance for cost of acquisition and are aiming at higher value buyers, whereas the second one gets in the regular buyers for you, right? So that's for e-commerce. I'd like to also talk about gaming, because that's one vertical that has seen a lot of success in other markets, other Asia markets, where Google has done similar work on some of their clients, right? And we've seen some very good results again over there. So in gaming, what happens is for monetization, right? It's largely driven by either in-app purchases, which people, they start with a free game and then make in-app purchases, and that's how they will earn. Secondly, by the engagement rate, how many times in a day the user is playing the game, and therefore giving additional advertising inventory for the app to monetize it. And the third one being longer term subscriptions, right? So if I'm paying for that app month on month, that's the third kind of a model that sort of works, right? So with MiFo, uh, what we can do is look at their initial behavior and predict a tendency, right? A tendency to make, let's say, uh, buy a subscription for the game, or have a longer term relationship with the brand, or for having a tendency to play 3 4 times a day, right, and be a highly engaged user. And then again use all of these to fuel acquisition, as well as targeted retention campaigns aimed at moving people ahead towards a higher lifetime value while they play the game. There are two more interesting verticals that I want to talk about after gaming. And we've been having a lot of conversations with our clients from these two verticals as well for MiFo, and there's a lot of interest. So the first one is OTT, and then we'll talk about banking as well. So for OTT, right, again, as we discussed for gaming, there are two major models that advertisers use for monetization. One is subscription, the other one is advertising, or what they call AVOD, right? So for OTT, what we can do with MiFo is predict subscribers and get more installs from people who are more likely to subscribe in the future for the app. So that's a very simple and effective use case for OTT. um, and the second one is predicting engaged users and running then increasing acquisition of engaged users and running targeted campaigns to improve engagement in audience who have, let's say, a higher propensity to watch a new show that has come up, right?
Yeah.
So you will want to single out people who receive content better than the others, and then talk to them when you come up with a new show, right? So
Yeah.
that's interesting application for OTT. The third one is uh, like the suppression use case on content platforms. There's a lot of users who are naturally engaged on the platform, right? They have like a certain schedule of watching. Without any nudge, they will go ahead and watch a certain show, right? Versus some others who will need a constant push to get them to the platform. So we could uh, predict people who have like a propensity to organically engage, and then use them strategically, either to suppress or decide a separate frequency at which they need to be spoken to make marketing more effective, right? And the next one is BFSI. So for BFSI, there is primarily for any company in that domain, multiple products that people will engage with, right? So they will acquire the customer on a particular product, and they will have like a larger portfolio of products that will be relevant for that same user, right?
Yeah.
So the first and foremost thing for them is to acquire a user who will transact on the platform, right? So if it's a bank account, people who will add funds to the account. If it's an insurance, somebody who will renew the insurance, right? So identifying people who will transact and acquire more such people is a first simple use case for BFSI. And the second one that I want to talk about is, because there is a large portfolio, cross-selling opportunities, right? Identifying propensity uh, to be cross-sold from product A to B to product A to C, and which user is will be more receptive to a communication regarding a particular cross-sell, can then determine how well engaged across the portfolio can the brand make a user, right? So that becomes a very useful case for BFSI. So I think that sort of sums up the use cases that I had to discuss for today. And what I wanted was to give people an idea of the kind of stories that we are building using MiFo, and then they can think up of their own stories that will be relevant for them and reach out to us, uh, where we can figure out how to execute it for them.
Got it. It's really interesting to see how these, the objectives of business are also like quite relevant in some. Like if you see BFSI and OTT, may the cross-selling opportunities are more, at the same time the acquisition pointer is high, and for some others it might be identifying the propensity of the users who are gonna convert, and then figuring out how do they wanna modify their game. So this all is really interesting. I think before we wrap up, I just want to understand from you, because it might many brand marketers and product marketers might have this question, right? With more privacy regulations coming in, and then many countries have already started implementing it. Where does our product stand, and then where does the solution stand? What do you have to comment around it?
Yeah, I think that's one single largest area of concern that we get from all of the prospects that we have spoken to so far, and very rightly so, because the data privacy ecosystem is very quickly evolving across the world, right? So uh, the policies are not clear at some places, and compliance has a different level of strictness across different orgs. Some places it's getting implemented right now. So at some places they have like legacy policies that have not evolved yet, right? So uh, I wanted to shed light on privacy in two parts essentially. One is some clarification on the data that we require for MiFo and the kind of data pointers that we use, and then how privacy safe are we. So in terms of data requirements, we have three broad categories of data that we seek from the and our advertiser. The first one is some sort of a user identifier that the advertising platforms Google and Facebook can identify and recognize. So it can be advertising ID or click IDs that are generated by the platforms, or user IDs that are created by the platform and sent to Google and Facebook by the advertiser, right? So some identifier that helps a platform, either Google or Facebook, recognize a particular user when we point towards them. That is the first kind of data. The second kind of data is essentially demographic data about the user, metadata that tells us where they are located and what browsers or devices they are using, etc. Right? What platforms did they clicked their ads on? What campaign did they respond to? Right? Things that tell us something about the demographics, psychographics of the user. So this is standard data parameters that are recorded on both app MMPs and as well as website analytics softwares, right? And the third one is activity data, right? So user activity, how they engage with the advertiser's website or app, and things like how many times they are performing a particular action, what all areas of the website have they navigated, what products they looked at, etc. So that's the third kind of data that we need. And this all these three combined is what helps us predict that a new user that comes in tomorrow will perform ABC action in the future. So more the amount of activity data that the customers can provide us, the better our understanding of that prediction would be, right? So, and considering the nature of these data requirements, there are a lot of concerns that people have because advertising ID is basically a device identifier, and there is a lot of privacy safety related nervousness across the board, right? So what we've done with MiFo is we've built it on Google Cloud, and we follow their data loss prevention protocol to make sure that all of first of all of the data that comes to us from our clients is safe, and there is no possibility of any sort of leakage to areas where it's not being used, right? And the second thing that we do is we work closely with the information security teams from our customers to make sure that the solution that we deploy for them is compliant with their policies as well. So whether it requires obfuscation of certain columns that are considered PII in their organization, etc. We can sort of build all of that into our deployment as well to make sure that we are compliant with their policies.
Got it. That sounds pretty like comprehensive, right? Like we are making sure that we are following the standard policies, that we get just the right amount of data to make sure that we're doing the right predictions, and at the same time, we're also saying that we want to be, we want to customize our guidelines to whatever the client compliances are.
That's
So
right.
yeah, cool. I think. Um, Thank you for sort of sharing all of this, and it really helped me understand the solution more better, and I'm sure it also helped solve some of the questions that our audiences are watching here. And for all of you who are still with us on this video, if you still have some questions or just want to get back to us in terms of whether this solution makes sense to you, or you have any questions in terms of how do you want to maximize the productivity in any sort of funnel, just get back to us, and we are more than happy to provide a free consultation either in the comments section below. You can just reach out to us, or on the website as well.